Welcome back to another episode. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, keep up to date with what I'm trying to put out there for you guys. So, the CrossFit Games are over. Okay, we have one new male fittest on earth, so fittest man on earth, and we have a 5-time female fittest on earth, Tia Claire Toomey. So Justin Medeiros, he is now the fittest man on earth. Now that Matt Fraser has retired, we've seen a new person take upon the top of the podium. And on the women's side, we've seen Tia Claire Toomey cap off her 5th consecutive win of the CrossFit Games. So what an amazing achievement. She has also won the most individual events out of anyone at the CrossFit Games, which is awesome. So in the news, I want to talk about a couple of things that have happened over the last couple of days and fill you guys in with what happened over the last few days of the CrossFit Games. So in my last episode, I spoke about the snatch lift. Now, when I was filming that, I had actually only watched the men's side. I hadn't watched the women's side. I did know that Annie and Tia went off against each other. However, I was unaware of what happened during that. So in that event, Brooke Wells was attempting a 190-pound snatch, which was about 86 kilos. And her elbow actually dislocated while she was attempting that lift. Now, she may have already had a pre-existing injury that was playing up because it has been noted that she was wearing a elbow sleeve on that exact elbow over the last few weeks. And I noticed that she actually was wearing that during the semi-finals event, which she attended, okay? So whether or not it's just an injury that she's had and she's kind of been managing it, and in that event, it just couldn't sustain the weight, and that's what caused it to dislocate. At this stage, we don't really know. She hasn't put anything out there. She has said that she is fine, and that obviously she'll come back, but unfortunately she had to, that was on the second last day of competition after the final event on the second last day, and then obviously she couldn't complete the final day of competition, which is a shame because she was doing really, really well. Now, let's have a look at who's back on the podium. So, in 3rd place on the women's side, we had Annie Thorisdottir. This is an achievement beyond anything else at the CrossFit Games. Like, yes, Tia's won the CrossFit Games 5 times, which is incredible and amazing and deserves so much credit and respect. However, Annie, literally less than a year ago, she had a baby. And in that time, she suffered from postnatal depression. She's really struggled with who she is as a person after having Freya. And then to come back and podium at the CrossFit Games is like next level. That's insane. Her mindset must be so strong to come back and do that. Like all weekend, she was in the zone, she was switched on, she knew exactly what her job was to do, and she came back and she executed her job perfectly. Also, Laura Horvath is back on the podium, so she came 2nd on the women's side. Amazing job. So she's recently, this year, she has been training under Ben Smith, and Ben Smith is now her coach. And it's obviously working because she is now back on the podium. You didn't see much of a fall from her out of that top 5 position. She really stayed at the top of that competition, and once she got into that podium contention, she didn't really fall out of it the whole weekend. So it was awesome to see her get back onto the podium. Now on the men's side, as I said, Justin Medeiros is now the fittest man on earth for 2021. He's the youngest male athlete to ever stand atop of the podium at the CrossFit Games, which is really cool to see. Young athlete, up and coming, awesome energy, and he really nailed his job and he did a great job with it. Okay, in 2nd place was Patrick Vellner. So I personally love Patty V. I think he is so cool, so relaxed, just like such a cool dude. And every year he digs himself a hole on the first event. He pretty much comes end of the pack, bottom of the pack on day one, and then it's like it's this steady climb out. But once he's on that road to climbing out, there's no stopping him. And it's obviously paid off because he is back at 2nd place on the podium. Then in 3rd place, we had Brent Fikowski. So all weekend, Brent looked like he was kind of suffering from a leg injury. Not once did he complain about it or mention it, But the Brent Fikowski that I'm used to seeing when he's competing is super cool, calm and collected. You can barely read his face. It's like he's got a poker face all the time. His facial expressions throughout some of these events were very different. So whether or not he's come back, so he's well known as a professor, okay? He takes very calculated risks. He controls every aspect of each workout. He knows exactly what he needs to do for every workout and how to work it. And he is like a mathematically person who just goes through and everything's time-based and analysed, and he just knows exactly how to run his race. Now, what I was thinking was maybe he came out this year and went, okay, I'm going to change my strategy. Usually he looks like a poker face. This year, he looked like he was absolutely hurting and he was struggling on some workouts. So maybe he came out this year and he went, that's it, I'm going to throw logic out the window and my strategies and everything, and I'm just going to attack every workout as hard as I possibly can and not worry about strategizing for each one. So that could have been why his face was, he no longer had a poker face. However, it could have just been the dealing with the injury that he had. But I'm super happy to see both of those on the podium again. They are such cool guys. As I mentioned, Tia has declared that she's going to return to competition next year, and by looks of things, if nothing changes between now and next year and we don't have some ridiculously crazy phenomenal athlete all of a sudden just pop up out of somewhere, I think that Tia Claire Toomey could easily secure herself a 6th CrossFit Games gold medal easily, okay? And what's really interesting about Tia, so while she's won 5 times at the CrossFit Games, she's actually been to the CrossFit Games 7 times. 7 years in a row, she has stood on the podium. So not many people can say they stood on the podium 7 times in a row, and every single year. So, rookie year right through to a current year that just ended. All right, and I wanted to also mention the Aussie teams. So like I said in the last vlog, usually our Aussie teams, they're just not that great. Okay, no offense to the Australian teams that have gone previously to the CrossFit Games. However, this year we saw a different outcome, especially in some of those events. So plus 64 CrossFit, so 64 Army Gold, okay, they ended up finishing in 6th place. They weren't that far behind 5th place, okay, and they had some excellent finishes, okay, so they had a 2nd, they had a 5th place finish. They also had a 4th place finish as well, so 2 4th place finishes, which is really good, okay, so being inside that top 5 for several workouts is something that we haven't really been able to do much in the past. Then CrossFit Urban Energy, so they actually had a 1st place finish in event 7. They also had a 2nd place finish in event 11 and were literally seconds behind CrossFit Mayhem. Okay, they also had a 4th place finish, a 3rd place finish, and a 6th place finish. Okay, but they did have a few events where they really struggled with. Okay, and they got quite below on the leaderboard, which then that's what pushed them down a little bit. So they ended up finishing in 7th place, which is still really good. We've got 2 teams from the Pacific region inside the top 10, which has never happened before. So to be able to say that and see what is happening in our Pacific region with our teams, I can't wait for especially CrossFit Urban to come back next year, because they're going to solidify a whole nother year of training together. They already own gyms together. They already know each other so well. Now they've got this idea of where their weaknesses and strengths are at. They're going to go back and they are going to grind hard and get back to next year, I reckon. Also, credit to them, they took their kids. In between workouts, they were looking after their children. So while everyone else was probably relaxing and having a nap, these guys were looking after their kids. I know that with Johan and Caitlin would look after their newborn, and then Johan would go to the park with their eldest son. I personally wouldn't have the energy to do that. I would need to go and have a sleep. So for them to be able to pull out 1st and 2nd place finishes and not even get really any downtime between workouts is pretty incredible. Okay, and then our CrossFit Isleside team, so they actually finished 11th. They had a 3rd place finish. They had an 8th place finish. They had a 5th place finish, or 2 5th place finishes. So they also had a few finishes inside that top 10 as well, which is awesome to see. And they only were just outside the top 10. So great job for them. Once again, I can't wait to see what they pull next year, what they're able to do after a little bit more training, and hopefully this year leading into next year's CrossFit Games, we see a lot less lockdowns because, for example, our side they're from Victoria. Victoria is just constantly locked down, gyms are closed all the time. So being able to train together consistently over the last 8 months hasn't really been efficient for them, okay, because they're not allowed to leave their homes a lot of the time. So I just want to mention our Aussie athletes who weren't inside the top 20 on the women's side. So Laura Clifton, she ended up coming 24th on 416 points. And then Ellie Turner, she came 26th on 404 points. So both of those guys, they got capped. They got into the top 30, then they got capped after that final workout leading today, which is a little bit sad for them both. However, they're both rookies this year. So after this year of training and really focusing on what their weaknesses are, it'll be interesting to see how they come back next year. Also, let's just hope that Cara Saunders comes back from all of this and has another go for next year. I do think that Cara Saunders hasn't finished yet. I think she's got a lot more to give, and I really want to see her get back into action. So 3 of our Aussie men competed at the CrossFit Games. So Jay Crouch, he finished 22nd, so 2 places out of the top 20, so not a bad effort. It was really good of him. Once again, he's still quite young, he's still up and coming, and it'll be interesting to see how hard he goes away this season and really works on it and comes back and fixes up what he had missed out on this year and what he puts out next year. Now, we did have 2 men who finished inside the top 20. So we've got Royce Dunn and Baden Brown. So Baden Brown had a 2nd place finish in one of the workouts. Royce Dunn also had a 2nd place finish. So both men really, really did great. So Royce, he had 2 4th place finishes. And Baden, he had quite consistent across like middle of the pack kind of finishes. And then on the last day, he kind of like dropped down a little bit on the leaderboard. Now, both of them, outstanding effort. Once again, I'm excited to see what they plan on doing for next year. Okay, it's going to be an exciting year for Australian CrossFit, that's for sure. And hopefully COVID just leaves us alone and we can get back on with life and enjoying CrossFit and going and spectating and going to comps and fitness with friends pretty much. So yeah. So looking into what's coming up next, okay, so we've got Rogue Invitational has just been announced. It's going to be on the 29th to the 31st of October in Texas. So obviously there'll be an online qualify stage, but then athletes will also get invited directly who were in the top 10 usually from the CrossFit Games, and then they'll have an online qualifier stage where they'll have wildcard athletes come through. Now, keeping in mind, Ricky Garrard, his suspension ends very soon. So whether or not that qualifying period falls after his suspension or not, I do wonder if he will actually come back and maybe make that his first event back into the CrossFit Games world. Otherwise, that's one thing that we can look forward to is the return of Ricky Garrard and how he's going. And it'll be interesting to see the response that we get from the CrossFit world after he's served his 4-year his penalty, okay, for taking a banned substance. So that's a recap of the 2021 Noble CrossFit Games. So don't forget, next year is going to be its last year in Madison. Then we're going to have a new venue in 2023, which will be exciting, a little bit different, a little bit of a change. I'm definitely hoping to go to the CrossFit Games next year, but it also depends on what's happening with COVID and stuff. And trying to get over to America is super expensive. But in the end, I think it's going to be awesome and it'll be a great experience. Thanks for joining me today.